There is so much I could talk about this week, but I'm going to stick with my original topic, which is religion. The other day, I watched the movie Philomena, and this movie came out a few years ago, and it's been in my queue for a while, and I finally queued it up, and it was an extraordinary film. Little did I know as I was watching the film that it was actually a true story. Well, that wasn't revealed until the end, because I just thought, oh, it's a fantastic little story. Certainly wasn't real. Well, it was real. And just to give you a brief synopsis of the film, apparently in Ireland, I guess in the early to mid part of the previous century, it wasn't, I guess, uncommon for those women, teenage women who became pregnant and were not married, to be sent to a convent. The nuns would take these girls in and they would provide the care and actually birth the babies for them. But in return, the girls had to stay there and work for 4 years. And of course, it wasn't the nice work; it was always the grunt work. So, in a sense, these girls were slave laborers for 4 years for the nuns. And of course, the nuns were not necessarily all that gracious towards them. The girls, after their babies were born, would only be allowed to see their babies for an hour a day. What also would happen is these girls would essentially sign away their rights to their babies, and the convent would seek buyers for the babies. Often these buyers were in America, and the going rate was about $1,000. And of course, Philomena was one of these teenage mothers, and her baby was sold to somebody in America. And 50 years later, she was living with the grief so much that she just needed to find out what happened to her, her little boy. In going back to the convent basically stonewalled her, and through happenstance, she happened to hook up with a reporter, and it was only through the reporter that she was able to get answers. And it was just it really was heartbreaking in the end. And there was a scene where one of the old nuns was saying, well, these teenagers and women deserved all the pain and suffering that they went through because they were unclean because they had sex. Unlike the nuns who had been true to God and chaste all these years. And it really was just sad and heartbreaking. And all I could think of is how have we gotten to this point where religion, where we have such a perverse interpretation of religion. Now, mind you, this woman was searching for her son in the early part of this century, which would have been right around the time or a little after the church was going through all of its bad publicity through its sexual molestation of young children. So you would think that going through what they were going through, the church would show some compassion in this case, but truly they did not. Now, this is not a condemnation of the Catholic Church, because it's not only the Catholic Church, it is the Protestant Church too. That when we look at it, when we look at these religions, when we look at Christianity, whether it be you a Catholic, be you a Protestant, we all too often use God not as a tool to bring us together, but as a weapon to keep us apart. And that is shameful. So you often hear now the Christians say, oh, we're under attack for our beliefs. Well, yes, you are. But Christianity is not under attack by those outside of the religion. Christianity is under attack by those who call themselves Christians, or as I like to call themselves, small c Christians, because they truly are not believers in the God that I believe in. A couple years ago, a local minister wanted to basically excluded me from a church because I was gay. Or that was one of the reasons. And he brought out the first chapter of Romans, the end of the first chapter. There's a couple verses there that he wanted to cite. And what I found interesting about that is that while he was willing to cite those verses, he wasn't willing to go to read the first verse of the next chapter, which really poked holes in any argument that he would make. And we call this, there's a book that I recently read, and they call these people Bible literalists, those that want to believe what they want to believe and don't believe what they should believe. And this person, this minister, for example, was also a divorcee. So while he was using Paul's words to condemn me, which were taken out of context, those words in context about divorced people, even about married people, he chose not to cite. And so it was all about me and all about that I was a fornicator. And I just sat there and I said, well, and I sat there at the time. I didn't really argue with him because that's really what he wanted me to do. But all I could think of is, how is this man who gets up into a pulpit every week, a man who says that he has studied the Bible, who leads Bible study, how is it that his beliefs are so perverse, that he doesn't take the time to read commentaries that would show him that the words that he is saying are just awful and they're not true? And while these words may not hurt me because of who I am, because of the inner strength that I have, these are words that kill people. These are words that are used against teenagers. They end up on the streets because of them. They end up doing drugs because of them. They end up taking their own lives because of these words. These words kill. So they're not innocent words. They're killing words. And these people are murderers for their beliefs. This is not God. This is not how God acts. And I just keep asking myself, how is it that I can read this Bible and understand more about God than these people who are in the pulpits? I had a local minister just last year, in the fall of last year, attacking my character because I disagreed that Franklin Graham was a good person, or a good minister. I just said he wasn't. And I didn't give any reason because I didn't want to argue with the man. And I quite frankly told him if he was happy to have his own views. But he wouldn't accept that. And he kept coming after me. And I just said, I'm not going to play your game. We see it now with this person in the White House, that all these evangelicals are rushing to his defense, rushing to support him. And you have to ask yourself how they can do it. I mean, this is not about party. This is about morals. And how do you look at the person who's in the White House now and say, oh, he's such a great God-fearing man, and then look at the person who preceded him in the White House and say, oh, he was the devil? It doesn't make sense. And that is what's tearing this country apart, is because it's about morals. It's about being willing to step up and say, this is wrong, looking at this man's tweets, looking at his words, and saying, this is not a man of God. This is not a man who believes in God, because if you believe in God, you would not act this way. If you believed in God, you would not support a health care bill that kicks 20-some million people out of their health care plans. If you believed in God, you would not set up a travel ban, but rather you would be welcoming. You would open the doors to this country and say that we are a country that cares. And if you were a believer in God, You would work to preserve, to do everything you could do to preserve this planet. Again, as I've said before, it's not about climate change, but it's about preservation of this planet. So it's disconcerting to me. It's disconcerting to me to say that, yes, I do believe in God. And yes, I still, even though my beliefs are attacked every day because I looked at these people and I lose respect. But I believe that there is a loving God. I believe that these people are just charlatans. And I'm not here to judge them, but I'm here to pray for them. But I will not abide by anything that they say, and I will continue to speak out whenever I can. We need to be a loving community, and the church needs to take a leadership role in being a loving community. The churches need to be a sanctuary where people can come, all people can come, regardless of their religion, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexuality, where all people can come inside and feel comfortable and not feel attacked. We need revival in this country. We need revolution in this country. We need God in this country. We need love in this country.